Welcome guys to another 5-minute quick edit, and today I'm gonna take this raw file right here and I'm gonna turn it into a picture like this in just about 5 minutes, while of course showing you every single step from start to finish. Alright, let's get started here by bringing up some of the shadows by quite a lot, and I'd really love to do that. Also bring down some of the blacks so some of the dark parts are still all kinda dark. And then bringing up the whites. Now the whites is something that probably a lot of you will only think are just the very bright parts, but that's not actually true, because if you zoom in here in just the foreground, as I move around the white slider, you can see it has a huge difference. So always keep that in mind, and perhaps even add a little bit more whites than what would look good with the sky, because you can always adjust the sky separately later with a graduated filter. So speaking of the sky, I am going to bring down the highlight slider though, so I get a lot of detail in there, and also bring up some of the contrast for additional punch, additional pop. And speaking of that, also bringing up the vibrance, bringing up the saturation by a little bit. I really prefer to bring up the vibrance instead of the saturation because it is kind of more smart. It knows what color isn't quite as present already, and will therefore kind of try to equivalent it out with the colors that aren't as present, whereas the saturation just brings up or down all of the colors very similarly. So with that being said, clarity, I really like plus clarity usually, but if I bring it up here, you can see all of the textures, because there are so many fine textures and small detailed structures of this sand, of this water, it kind of pronounces it too much. So instead of going into the plus, I am actually going to go a bit into the minus, even if it's just about -10. So that looks pretty good for the overall look already, I think. Now, color temperature, I'm actually going to make this more bluish while adding a bit of, well, actually let's just leave it tinted how it is, and go into the total curve. Now the total curve is really great for adjusting very small and kind of detailed parts of the exposure. So for example, I want to bring up the lights while bringing down the highlights, so all of the very bright parts aren't clipped or overdone. And shadows, yeah, I love to bring down the shadows actually by a little bit, because then you will have still some of the darkness and blacks and contrast within the very dark parts of your picture. And after the tonal curve, yeah, okay, so I think it looks pretty good if I quickly compare. Not bad at all, but I do want to bring in some color. So for that, I'm going to go into the split toning, add quite a bit of warmth here, and yeah, I think even about 50-60%, quite a lot. But then in exchange go into the shadows and add just a bit of light blue, you know, nothing crazy, nothing close to the actual saturation that I did into highlights, but just something like that. And okay, so here is where it's gonna stop with the naturalness, because I'm gonna do something quite crazy, and that is go into the local adjustments, actually to radial filter, just grab a very big radial filter while inverting the mask, having the feather at 100, and then going into the plus exposure, plus whites, and going like crazy into the warm tones here. So don't worry, I'm gonna move the filter all the way up to the right here. And my goal is to make it seem as if the sun would be on the top right, even though it probably isn't quite there. And just make it, you know, it's an additional layer of interest, and it's something that might work, it might not work, especially if you like natural pictures. Well, then you shouldn't watch many of my videos anyways. You know, I understand if you think that's kind of overboard and doesn't really work, but I still want to try it out. And you know what? I actually don't think it looks too bad. So let's just keep it and work with it. Why not? It's just an edit after all. I can always change it later on. And the thing is, with this warm tones, I really want to play with the color and the color differentiation. So I'm going to grab another filter, a little bit more blue tones here instead of warm tones, and just add even kind of a purplish tone, why not? And go over the very top left, add some contrast with it, and that way we have some differentiation in the blue tones from dark blue, medium blue, light blue to kind of the warm tones right here. And I think I'm gonna even have to add some blue tones right here in the water and in the foreground in just some certain parts, because otherwise everything is just too monotone. So that isn't that bad. So let's add another filter right here, this time again with a little bit of plus exposure, and again with the warm tones. Also gonna play with the tint a little bit and just make it look really kind of crazy like that. So afterwards, let's add some dodge and burning as well, so just making individual parts either darker and brighter. And I really don't think I'm gonna have to decrease any of the exposure. Instead, I'm just gonna increase some of the filters right here for the castle. Then right click duplicate, adding some filters right here. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of the dodge and burning. Now I'm gonna go back into the global adjustments real quick and just enable profile corrections while also correcting the horizon so it's actually straight. Then going into the effects to add some vignetting. And vignetting is great for additional mood because it helps to close out the corners, make more attention towards the center. And I think, you know what, since the top right is already so bright, I'm actually gonna grab a graduated filter in the local adjustments and add a very big one over the left part, so pretty much in parallel where the brightness is. And then go into the minus exposure here, quite a lot, and then add even another one just for the very edge here and go even further into the minus exposure. Now what I think I'm gonna have to do is just fine tune some of these hues, because yeah, the warm tones could be a little bit more orange, while at the same time the green tones could be a bit more pronounced. At the same time though, I'm gonna decrease some of the yellow tones, increase the oranges, and you know, this is really fine-tuning stuff. It's probably not that interesting to watch. So I think, yeah, let's just add a very last rail filter with some blues here to really have at least a little bit of blue water. This is also a great help for additional complexity in the entire color scheme once again. So yeah, I think this is where I'm gonna end it, so let's just see where we started at with the raw file. Now this right here is the raw file, not bad to be honest, and afterwards, you know, it might be a little bit overdone, I'm the first one to admit that, but I think, you know, if you compare it from before to after, the idea of having this top right super bright and even clipped in some parts, while being very warm, even though it might not be super perfect and with the colors and so on, I actually like the idea here. Yeah. Well, anyways, that's been it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching, and if you'd like to see more, then be sure to subscribe. Also, there are 2 more videos to the left right there. And yeah, goodbye and have a wonderful day.